Hello and welcome everyone. Here is Andy. Here is our bonfire. Today it is Bonfire Talks episode 2, which I named on aspirations, tough love from teachers, and language alter egos. And today's episode will be a bit short because I'm only going to catch up with some topics from the first episode, and the second reason is that I am slightly under the weather. I think I got sick, and I don't want to cough and sneeze. I'll try to minimize those consequences or side effects of my condition, but I won't be able to do that. To not do that at all, and so don't want to torture you, but the episode I think must go live and must be placed on YouTube and Twitch and Good Game. So here I am. And give me a second. So I'll begin with some organizational news because there are some changes I've made. So last week I tidied up a bit. Elysian, hello. Pleasure to have somebody to talk to. And thanks for the wish. I wasn't sneezing, but a cough I think qualifies as well for a reason to be blessed a bit. Yeah. So the organizational news that I have from the last week, from last week, I want to say that to create spontaneous content is quite an interesting task, because you essentially have to prepare much more than for something that you planned, because, well, that's just how spontaneity works. And so last week on Friday I spent a lot of time rehauling the way the series looks and preparing the questions, preparing the topics, preparing the content I'm gonna talk about. So the first change I made was to update the posters a bit. So as you know, I have the Russian series and the English series for this type of content, and so I needed to choose a good name for the Russian series. I used neural networks there because it was just helping me with brainstorming ideas. So eventually I got my idea. And the English series will have, well, I think an unchanged name. It's Bonfire Talks. I like it because it has this play of words, because we have bonfire, and it's already a kind of a symbol of my channel. You know, it's all about fire, about bonfires, about lighthouses, like the one that I have behind me. And this Bonfire Talks speaks some information, and at the same time we can interpret that as like conversations at the bonfire. So there is this interesting dichotomy of interpretation. And the second thing I changed was trying to add the name before the broadcast and, well, afterwards, so that you can see what I'm gonna talk about, and check if maybe you are curious or not about the topics. Besides that, I've already altered the way we will meet, the frequency. So initially the plan was to meet every Saturday to speak in Russian, and then the next weekend to speak in English, but I thought that way it's gonna take ages to get past the first episodes, which will be the most kinda rough and unfinished and unpolished and so on and so forth. So I want to make it speedier, and besides that, I just want to generate more content. And so we've had an episode, an English episode last week, and already have had 2 Russian episodes, and the third one is upcoming this Saturday. And also, speaking of the system, I will be trying to, like I did last week, I'll be trying to set the topic to talk about, then give my monologue about it, and after I've finished with my monologue, I'll hear out your questions, commentaries, and respond to those. And that I want to do because I want to keep the consistency of my opinion, not to be interrupted, and to be able to make some kind of cuts later to publish as clips on YouTube, to create shorter videos, as I don't think all people will want to watch the longer episodes. Some of them might want to see, well, what the whole thing is about. And well, you know, I do that myself. So I first watch some smaller chunks of content from a creator, and then if I like them, I might switch to longer pieces, longer lectures. So Daisy Beans, hello. My life has been quite active, thank you. I think I got sick, that's why I'm gonna make a very short episode today, but I'll try to endure, and I also hope you will endure my slightly changed voice and occasional sniffs. But yeah, so here I am talking about English, education, teaching, learning. Have I finished with the organizational news? I think so. So we've slightly updated the branding, the naming approach, and I'll try to stay as systematic as possible. Yeah. Get well soon, Andy. Thank you very much. Thank you. I do appreciate your wish. And how are you? How is your life out there? I hope you're doing well. Yeah, so about my sickness, actually, it's a funny thing. I guess I can digress a bit. For the start, I think so I have a difficult relationship with spices, with food spices, and I prefer not to have them at all. Yeah, so I only eat salt and pepper, in very small dosage pepper, and that's it. So, but recently I got some noodles, and you know, noodles are an exception, and at the same time, as a vegetarian, I cannot eat a lot of noodles because they contain fish remains and some seafood remains, as the manufacturers tell on the package. And I was quite disappointed by that fact for years, and recently I just understood that I can buy paprika and spices, red pepper, separately as spices and use them. And I think I had overused those. At least that's my hypothesis, that I kind of provoked some kind of an allergy in my throat and sinus areas because I overused pepper. And so I think my body just rejects spices, or maybe I just contracted some flu. Just tired of the classes, seriously considering becoming a stay-at-home mom now. Then there is me who inhales spices. Well, yeah, I actually know a lot of people who just adore spices, and like the spicier the better. I don't belong to those people, and in fact, if they smell too much, I will, with a high chance, refuse to eat food. I once made rice with spices added there by the manufacturer, and so it smelled so horribly that I threw away the finished product just because I couldn't stand the smell. For me, it's important that after I finish food, there is no smell. Like in the flat. I don't like when like a soup is being cooked and it kind of fills the whole flat with this smell. And so I'm very finicky about smells. And not that I hate smells, no, I love many, but I'm also very, as I said, choosy, and I try to make smells beautiful and kind of high quality, not this kind of rotten cabbage smell that I remember from my kindergarten. So, not that we ate rotten cabbage, of course, just I'm exaggerating for the effect. Anyway, let's go to the topic of education. And I have 3 questions for us today. The first one being aspirations, as you see from the name. The second one is tough love from teachers, and the third one is about language alter egos. And the question about aspirations is actually a kind of finalization of the conversation we had last stream. And namely, I want to talk about this aspect that many learners, allegedly, as my colleague asked, many learners allegedly want to speak like a royal family and in English, and they kind of neglect their own language, and they always have this kind of high level role model, language model to follow, and worry about mistakes in the target language, for example English, and don't worry about their mistakes in their native tongue, for example Russian. Here I want to say that I guess there is again an element of subjectivity, because I honestly haven't met a lot of people who have told me that they have some particular or even abstract language model. I mean, semi-specific language model. Only sometimes they say, well, I want to talk like those businessmen on YouTube, the same level of business slang, the same level of terminology, fluency. Some people say, well, I want to be like my colleagues, and usually that means the best, like colleagues with the best English possible, because they have, I think, a cognitive illusion that everyone speaks like those colleagues with the best level of English, but, well, of course, it's not true. But most people just want to get better than themselves. And so here I want to probably say that I don't think people have this tendency to strive for aristocratic levels of English. Maybe for teachers, it's true, because teachers already have a high level, and for them, the higher the better. But regular learners, I don't think so. And yeah. And I think if a person has a high standard of English, or wants to reach a very, like, this very flowery, very beautiful manner of speaking in English, that usually means the person does care about his or her Russian level, or, well, native tongue level. And I think these two are in close correlation. And yeah, so that's what I want to say here about aspirations. Speaking of mistakes, I guess if people are worried about making mistakes in English, they're worried for a reason, and that's kind of a maybe unpopular opinion. I do think people should worry about their mistakes. We have this speculation that mistakes should be kind of forgiven, and you should forgive yourself for having errors because you are learning. Like, yes, of course, but yeah, when you're a native speaker, and yes, maybe you are not a writer, a public speaker, and your native language is not like super eloquent and super flowery, but still you're at least, let's say, a good upper intermediate. So you really communicate and convey all your ideas properly without logical errors. You don't make mistakes with tenses, with critical structures, syntax, and when you are a learner, usually you do make such mistakes. You mess up tenses. You fail to convey what you want to say, and so the fact that you are worried actually could be very well explained. And that's why I don't again think that people neglect their own language, because, well, they don't. They speak fine. And of course they want to do the same as they do in their native language, in a foreign language. Lucian writes, people who don't know English don't notice a difference between aristocratic level and C1 without excellent pronunciation. Sorry, with excellent pronunciation. Yeah, so I think I agree. So it's always, as I said, it's, I think, a subjective thing. So who wants what, in what amount, depends. And the initial premise, you remember, was that my colleague who asked this question thought that everyone wants to speak like the royal family. Everyone wants to, what was that? Everyone is afraid of English. So yeah, I think it's not the story. Actually, it's very dependent on each individual. And yeah. The final thing I want to maybe tell was a funny metaphor I came up with thinking about those mistakes and errors and levels in English and Russian. So imagine a person who is a Russian person, and this person has two pairs of trousers. One pair is green for Russian and blue for English. And the green pair of trousers this person wears splendidly, can sit, stand, walk, run, cannot do a split. So some some acrobatics is impossible, but it's like fine. Not that the person cares, but the blue pair of trousers the person wears inside out, so kind of has problems even with the simplest things, and not to mention, let alone like running or sitting or walking. So, and this is like, if you cannot do what you, if you cannot even do half of what you can do in your own language, well, you will be worried about your mistakes, and very legitimately so. The same with having a Gucci short and a simple one, not being told about it. I wonder if you mean that if you don't know the brand under the fabric, then you won't be able to tell them apart? Well, yeah, I think I see your point. Yeah, so like you to start distinguishing really outstanding things from standard things or even primitive things, you have to have a certain amount of experience and exposure. That makes sense. And that's why, yeah, that's why teachers get very obsessed with how they speak, how many mistakes they make, and striving for higher, even higher levels, because yeah, it's actually interesting. I had conversations about that with other professionals. Just give me a second. Yeah. So I had conversations with other colleagues, and they were like, I want to become a better teacher, and I was like, well, are you like reading about business and marketing and kind of self-promotion and stuff? And the person was like, no, I'm trying to get into more methodology. And I think it's a wrong way, because I mean, not exactly wrong. It's just dangerous, risky, and also very exhausting for the specialist because, well, if you are already excellent, then probably even your most talented students already cannot understand between you today and distinguish between you today and you half a year forward, because you're very far away from the nearest competitors, kind of like, not competitors, but, well, so I mean, for your clients it's not visible what you're trying to achieve. And I don't think it only is applicable to teachers, right? It's I think applicable to any profession. So at some point of development, a client cannot really tell apart two specialists with a decent level, but if one specialist, so if they both have this decent level, but one of those two specialists is also a very, very high, like a proficient expert in some subtle details, in just some subtleties, I should say, the client probably won't understand that, unless this client is, well, a bit, or not a bit, is well informed about this industry. And there has to be a lot of time to have passed before this moment is reached. And the same applies in English. So, I mean, in education. Yeah, an upper intermediate student and advanced student, of course, will feel the difference between a proficient teacher and an advanced teacher, for example. I mean, the levels and pronunciation and variety of vocabulary and grammar, versatility and overall language performance, and kind of the vibe that the person emanates, right? So it's an interesting question, yeah. It's rather about teachers, actually. So I think I'm gonna put this into our ideas bank, but let's think how to coin that topic. It's, well, if I want to become a better teacher, do I dig methodology, something like that? Maybe better methodology. Oh no, like development of hard skill. Development of hard skill doesn't equal development as a specialist, or doesn't always mean. Interesting. So here we leave the, well, sorry, I need to give you a chance to maybe ask some questions. So if there are questions or commentaries here before we move forward to question number 2. In the meantime, I have a question here. So maybe you can tell, what do you want in English? Like, what is your aspiration? What are you trying to target? Because for me, that would be a very understandable question. I've got so many icons in terms of English throughout my life, or English life. I tried to mimic my teachers in a private English school. There was a Canadian, there was an American who I picked things from, and then video games characters, for instance. I told you probably last time, yeah, I definitely told you about Charles Reed from The Sinking City, with his beautiful voice and some very cool expressions, and Deacon from Days Gone, who so I watched the game on YouTube. I didn't play it. I watched the full gameplay, the full, rather, cutscenes gameplay, and I was so impressed by his style. And I talked like him for a week straight, I think. And I'm not even mentioning, I am actually mentioning now a lot of YouTubers like Professor Jordan Peterson, who I listen to. Well, I've listened to hundreds of hours of his speech, and I've borrowed so many phrases and manners, and so not just words, phrases, and sometimes sentences, intonation spikes, and I can continue the list. So I cannot say I'm trying to talk like one person. I would say I'm trying to talk like myself, but I've just, as I said, I've just had so many sources to reach that point. I've been stealing the language from here and there, but the royal family, not really. In fact, I'm tired of being a bit highfalutin from time to time with my posh or pompous choice of vocabulary. I do want to get down to earth a bit and speak in a more sometimes slangish manner, more street English. That part I lack, honestly speaking, and for that I need to probably spend more time with series or movies of some certain kind, and definitely I'll need to travel and spend some time with people who wield such type of English. So I see that there isn't anything to discuss on that matter. Let's go to what? Let's go to tough love from teachers, a topic we touched upon before, and I don't remember how much we developed that in episode 1, or the English episode 1. But I just wanted to summarize my philosophy here. So the dispute here is as follows, or rather some controversial statements are like, a kind teacher cannot teach effectively, and true excellence of a skill is reached through harsh drill, when the coach, the teacher, is unforgiving and sometimes even brutal with the student, with the learner, to ensure success at a cost of some loss of, some sacrifices to be made, let's say, and this toil and moil, hard work to reach some goals. And I want to say here that there is this concept I picked up, learned about in a book about business, about how to scale up your business, the law or the principle of polarities, that we don't have like good or bad things in this world. Often we have polar things like chaos and order, like creativity and bureaucracy. We have let me remember. So, well, these two I think are enough to demonstrate what I mean. So let's say you have a startup and you have 5-10 people, and for you what's important is to be creative, to come up with ideas, to have quick communication between the workers, and you don't want to stifle them with bureaucracy, with red tape and endless meetings, so you will probably expect them to be a bit chaotic but very productive. And as your company grows and reaches the number of, let's say, 50 or 100 workers, well, you have to have a hierarchy, you have to have a system, because because if you don't have such organizational structure, such a structure, you probably will fall prey to entropy, to chaotic energies inside your company, and people will not know what they are supposed to be doing, who they are supposed to communicate with, and so on and so forth. So at some point you will have to establish some regulations, you will have to add structure and maybe a bit of bureaucracy. And the point there was to adapt, move your look at where you are and adjust according to this polarity system. And yeah, so kindness and brutality are, I think, in the same within the same scope, within the same limits. You cannot say that kindness or harshness are inherently bad or good things. They have to be situationally applied, first of all. Secondly, I think here we should bring up the question of parenting, so how we raise children, and my experience with some psychological lectures helped me understand this quite a simple idea. So a child is born with a certain set of predispositions, predilections and tendencies, and well, it is claimed that a parent's task is to look intensely at the new person, understand who this person is, and help unfold, help develop, nothing more, nothing less. So a parent must not impose his or her own will, aspirations, or imagine that his or her child is somebody who this child is not, which is very difficult. And then teachers should kind of take their relay button, no, not a button, damn it. What is this? Baton. Yeah, baton is relay baton. You know, this stick when people run and give it to each other. So, or rather, educators should just join this race together with parents, ensuring that the child, the teenager, is truly developed in a way that this teenager requires. And that's the second thing. So the third thing is we have a concept of teachers we think are too tolerant, too kind, and we normally, some people don't respect them, like children don't follow the orders and misbehave, and we have too harsh teachers who people are afraid of, and the KPI results also are, well, unimpressive. So being a slightly dramatic person, I am a dramatic person, a kind of poet of tragedy, I call myself. I would say the task of a teacher, the task of an educator, is to make a very well calculated blow so as not to harm, but teach a lesson. Because the tragic goal, the tragic purpose of parents, or kind of tragic, is to prepare the child for the world, which is at points unforgiving and harsh and ruthless. And if you don't do your job well as a parent, well, chances are high the world will do your job, and in a very, very visceral manner, and will mutilate the child. And so you have to be very adequate with that, very, very aware of that. You cannot be too kind because the world won't be, and you cannot be too harsh because, well, the child is not that fortified to stand against you, and you have a chance to break the person in front of you. It's like a free therapy session. Very interesting. Well, thank you very much. I do hope it makes sense. So you see, and why I call this tragic, because at points you will, well, first of all, you will miscalculate and damage probably, which, well, we're all humans, we make mistakes. But even without miscalculation, let's say you're a very balanced parent, still you will have to be rough at points because you don't want your child to be hurt. So you will have to hurt the child yourself, kind of prohibiting something or, well, I mean, it's, you see, you cannot just suddenly start doing that. It has to be a philosophy from the very early ages. And if you do everything correctly, I think it can be very mild. If you explain why the fifth toy shouldn't be bought, why, like, no, you can't go to that drug party and have a full week of blasting fun because it's better to study. Like, if a child, I think, is explained at every point why it is so, probably there is a way to avoid this kind of hurt. But I'm not a parent, I don't know. I cannot claim that I know the answers here. But as an educator, I can, well, say that there are a lot of parallels. And so an educator must imagine what are the limits for this person. Should we say discipline? Yes, discipline is another word we can remember here. It's just, again, I'm trying to describe everything in a more poetic way, but yeah, discipline is actually one of the words I like. So emotional discipline or discipline here, but discipline, you know, has this kind of unpleasant connotation for many people, and I'm trying to reframe also. But discipline, I think, is inherently a great thing. So to develop, cultivate discipline in people, in learners, helps them a lot in the long run. And I do try to develop this discipline in my students as well. I want to know that they don't need me to be successful, that they understand why I'm trying to explain that, and they will keep up the spirit independently from me. But let's not get ahead. I wanted to say that there are a lot of parallels. I mentioned before that my calibration stage is very often long. So when I have a new student or when I get a person who we haven't met for a long time with, I usually spend 2-3 months just understanding how they live, how much they work, what their life is about, because I want to understand how much English can enter their life to reach the targets they put in front of themselves, and what kind of expectations I can have, so that when we start actually working on those targets, I will be able to say, like, hey, over like last 2 weeks there has been some slacking. What happened? Because I'm not receiving the same feedback, or I've noticed some kind of some kind of a decay, or like more mistakes in your speech. Why is this happening? And there could be an explanation, or there could be no explanation, and then I can just say, okay, so are we still true to our goal? And there I show my kind of, not tough love. Well, I mean, usually I'm being gentle and respectful. I'm just saying, well, like, you know, I have expectations. You know, we have expectations, that is, and that we have an agreement and we have to work. So, like, please think whether the goals are still true and whether you still want to achieve them. And usually it helps a lot. So it's kind of a showdown that I have with some of my students from time to time. It helps a lot. People react positively to that because, well, we are being honest with each other, because we understand why we do that, and they see that I'm not letting them slack, and at the same time I'm respecting that they have their own life. I think so. I don't want to pretend I know how they should live or work or study, because I don't. And I don't think like the same situation with a parent cannot live a life for the child, only can give some kind of navigation. And that's how I see it. So the point is that I guess tough love, discipline are necessary in education, but have to be highly adjustable, flexible, always checked. So it has to be always checked whether the amount of pressure, the amount of effort, the amount of pressure is adequate, and maybe it has to be lowered or increased to keep up performance levels, to keep up with the KPI. I'm trying to remember if I have said everything I wanted here. Well, I guess so. Maybe you have some thoughts, but while you're thinking, I just want to finalize again, saying that, well, an example. So a person comes to the lesson, and let's say this learner is talking about his or her day, some news for 20 minutes straight out of 60 we have, and at some point I can, well, so what options do I have? I can just continue like that. I can just keep listening. So I'll just literally be listening to this person for 60 minutes. The second option is I can say, well, look, I can interrupt and say like, well, I'm very sorry for interrupting, but we agreed that today we would be, well, doing these tasks. So are you sure? Like I appreciate your story and I would love to continue, but we also have we have a task to do. And usually people say, yeah, of course. Like they say, sure. Like what I'm talking about is, well, nice, but you're right. We have to do this, and so we switch to exercising, and then if we have time, we can come back to those topics we dropped. And the third way is I can not give a person a chance to speak from the beginning and say, okay, we have a program, we have a plan for today, so we are going to do this, let's begin. Where I kinda ignore what the person came with. And that means mood, the vicissitudes of the day, you know, the ups, the downs that a person maybe wants to tell about. And I prefer to stick with the second way, because the first one betrays weakness on the side of the teacher, or, I mean, often, like, I'm too afraid to interrupt, but that means that. So just talking doesn't improve the language level. And the third way is kind of neglecting the person's inner world, which I also am very afraid of. I would love to be staying in the loop, you know, to stay current, to know what the person is concerned with, what has been happening with him or her, because I want to be contextualized. I want to give the most calibrated, the most possibly related tasks to the person, and adjust the program, adjust our conversations in a way that the lessons are about exactly him or exactly about her. And I want to know that I work with a person in front of me, that I don't exercise my power as a teacher, that I have a plan that will fit anyone, anywhere, anytime. I don't think this plan exists. I don't think it has ever existed. I don't think any ultimate thing exists in the world, and you probably know that everything has to be adjustable, everything has to be flexible, and I try to be balanced. So sometimes I would listen to 50 minutes of this speech, and we will work for 10. Sometimes we will talk for 10 minutes and work for 50, and it's ever changing, and well, has been working well. So something like that. What I can say. We'll be moving to question 3, which will be very short. So if you have questions or thoughts, please don't miss a chance to put them forward, because I won't be streaming for long today, as I said, because of my sickness. All right. So question number 3 is about this alter ego. I keep obsessing about the pronunciation, to be honest. Alter ego. What does Cambridge say? What if I have massacred it several times? Alter ego. So it is ego, at least according to the Cambridge Dictionary. The question I want to ask here is, if you speak more than one language, do you think you have developed a different personality in the second one? Because it's a legit question. I want maybe your opinion later in the commentaries on YouTube if you watch this video, or so even if you're watching now, it would be nice if you left a commentary later after the recording is after the streaming, the broadcast is finished. So I think, and it's quite a radical opinion maybe, Matt Knox says, don't think I did. Interesting. I just thought that, by the way, hello, of course, pleased to see you here again. In my opinion, I thought that if you don't develop a second personality or a third, it's not like you probably haven't really learned the language to the fullest. I mean, there is something very special about languages. They tell so much about our nationality, our identity, our link with the country, and so to speak the language efficiently like they do, you have to integrate or internalize not only the vocabulary and grammar, but also the manner, the intonation, the body language, the cultural phenomena, and many other things. And during this process, I think it's inevitable that you will start changing. But maybe it works not for all people. Definitely worked for me, because I told you, and maybe several times already, well, definitely several times, that for me, my English personality was much stronger. In my 5th year at school, I began stammering. So I spoke very badly, and it was a hard thing for me to speak publicly at school, at university later. And in English, that was quite miraculous. I stammered less and felt much more comfortable. Then I went to the private English school to study also, and kind of English became my safe haven, and it was always more pleasant. It was always more cheerful. It was always more, well, peaceful. And later at university, the best parts of my life were connected to English. After university, the same. My English club, my my lessons, my English personality developed with a very high pace. The Russian one was kind of dragging behind, and eventually just the English one kind of incorporated the Russian one. Kind of okay, let's merge. And I mean, I still feel more comfortable as an English speaker, as an English person. Yeah, something like that. So it was just, yeah, of course, very surprising to stammer in Russian more than in English. I might be mistaken, but it probably has something to do with the facial muscles, the muscles of my jaw, because I feel like when I wake up in the morning, I have real difficulties speaking in Russian. To call to some clinic and make an appointment is almost an impossible task. To pronounce my surname even. While in English, I can just, well, get myself into this chair and start teaching and talking and blabbering, and it's not that difficult. I wanted to use a very special word here. Just let me. Yeah, I wanted to say I wanted to plop myself down onto a chair. So yeah, just some kind of more interesting language, and start a lesson, and there is no big deal with that. And I think we engage different muscles. Like my Russian muscles wake up later. Matnok says I would disagree about those mannerisms being a personality. Language is just a tool to express inner thoughts, and yeah, those tools differ a lot, resulting in the expressions of those thoughts being different, but for a whole other personality to appear, what needs to change are those inner thoughts instead. Pardon me for this wall of text. Okay, let me now read it again. So I would disagree. What you're saying, is it backed by some psychological study or neurological, neurobiological study? Because what I have seen about from psychological lectures, I've seen language is not just a tool to express inner thoughts, not to mention the fact that inner thoughts are, let alone the fact that inner thoughts, what are they, is a huge question. Like, what is consciousness, and what part language plays there? So it's kind of terra incognita there still in science, and well, it's a very difficult conversation to have, and I wouldn't even engage because I lack competence. But what I do know is that a language is not just a tool. It's much more than that. And in fact, when you, I think, so I'm not talking about you, Matnox, of course. I just mentioned that before during the streams, that when people view a language as something mechanical, problems begin. So it's like, it's not a subject at school. It cannot be a subject. On the deepest level, those thoughts aren't even verbal. Yes, but what are they? What are they? And I mean, it's in our approach and viewing what language is. Yeah, I would just, it's not exactly my approach. I would just caution in general, I would caution people from viewing a language as a tool or as something that has to be logical and rational, because logic and rationality at the current stage of our civilization are, well, only so can do only so much to explain certain things, and our brain doesn't belong to those things that can be explained yet. So recent developments with the neural networks made a step, unexpected step, towards the explanation of how we speak through those insanely long formulas that they use. And like the author of Wolfram algorithm in his article said, this discovery means not that neural networks are something crazily clever, it just means that to speak is actually a simpler process than we had thought. Still, neural networks cannot speak as well as we do yet, and it's still a hell of a lot of work to process, to channel our thoughts from our heads into some verbal, articulated matter. And also, as I said, a language is not just a set of words, right? It's body language, it's tones, intonation. If you start speaking like you speak Russian, or, for example, Chinese, like, let me give you an example. So you meet a friend and you say, hello. And your friend says, hello, how are you? And you say, I'm good. And you do nothing after that. So you just say, I'm good. And say, where's the document? And so it's already a huge miscommunication. Like, communication isn't happening because there is a clash between the business etiquette in Russia and business etiquette in Europe. Well, I'm exaggerating, of course, but the canonic exchange should be, well, hi, with high intonation, kind of positive intonation. And how are you? Fine, how are you? Oh, I've been to a great museum recently. Really? So it's not really. So it's a huge world of different aspects, not just vocabulary again. And and that's why I'm talking about personalities, because I borrowed not only words, but I borrowed a lot of manners of speaking and intonations and lots of other things. And I'm very grateful for that, in fact. I mean, that enriched me, massively enriched me. And I think of those people who have a great level of English, like they have perfect vocabulary, like C1, C2 vocabulary, excellent grammar. But when we start talking, they're kind of they're very heavy. So they don't engage with you. They don't ask questions. They don't follow some certain patterns of communication. So, and usually, I think, for example, if they came to an exam, IELTS exam, speaking of those infamous exams, so I don't think they would get a high mark or the highest mark for that, because so yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think you're right, Mitnex. It's about the way you interpret what a language is and what is the target of what is the function of the language. But I just think it wouldn't hurt to interpret it as widely as possible because, well, that sets a high threshold of development, not threshold. So it's like you have a more diverse set of targets to achieve. Not only kind of the hard skill aspect of that, not only the vocabulary block, but also the way how to present yourself as a person. Something like that. And basically that's it for today. I mean, I wanted to have a closure with fears and errors in English, and we talked about tough love, and we talked about alter egos. So I have a couple of questions for the future. The first being, well, what is your aspiration in English? Do you try to mimic somebody, or you're trying to just become better? The second question, do you think you have developed a different personality or not, and why? And it's actually quite interesting, yeah, to know whether people will have opposite views here. And maybe you have some other questions to ask me about, again, teaching and learning. You know why we are here. On Saturday, I'll be talking about new stuff in Russian. That is, if I recover enough. I hope I do, because the genesis of my illness is unclear to me now. Could be just allergy to pepper, could be not. Yeah, so I'll be stopping the broadcast now. Sorry that it has been so short, but in some way it's better. I mean, 1 hour is not too short still. And thanks to those who have come to listen, to talk, to participate. Thanks to Illusion, thanks to Daisy Beans, thanks to Moyat Knox, of course, for such a insightful, for such a meaningful reply. Walls of text are welcome. I actually appreciate a good discussion. And I want to apologize for my voice today. Oh, there is a message now. Let me check it. See it in yourself, and all those little behavioral things are separate entities. And yes, different behaviors exist. I get it. So you just interpret them separately. So let me read for those who are listening. The way I see it, language itself and all those behavioral things are separate entities. And yes, different behaviors exist as satellites of some languages more often than others, but still they're not parts of languages. Those walls of text are, first of all, really welcome on my streams. I love, I love a good discussion, and that's essentially why I'm here, to have a discussion, not just to play or talk. Also, I would appreciate if you add something later under the video on YouTube, just for me to be able to come back to those points and maybe take some future some future fuel for discussion. And yeah, so if I feel fine tomorrow, I'll come back with some game. If I don't, well, we'll have to meet later, but stay tuned, stay updated, and let me know if you would like to talk about something else before Saturday. Thank you very much again, and cheers.